Tonight on Secure the Continent, our focused country for today is Uganda, where over 42 students and civilians have been killed in an attack on Mpondwe Lhubiriha Secondary School by suspected militant group Allied Democratic Forces. We have more details for you in this package. Take a listen.
Ugandans are still mourning after rebels believed to be linked to the Allied Democratic Forces and Islamic State (IS) attacked the Lhubiriha Secondary School in Mpondwe, a town in the country's western region, killing at least 40 people in the process. According to locals, the rebels entered the school dormitories, setting the buildings on fire, leaving very graphic scenes in their wake. 3 members of the local community and a school guard were also killed in an attack that also left 8 people in a critical condition.
Mpondwe Lhubiriha Secondary School, where the suspected rebels, could be ADF, attacked the school and they murdered on spot by killing 22 students from this school, and then threw a bomb in a hostel that also killed 17 students. Now the total at the school is going up to 39, and within the community, as they were going back, they also murdered 2 people, a female and a male. This is bringing up the number to 41. Right now we are here trying to put together the dead bodies that were burnt beyond recognition in the hostel, so that they can be partitioned and numbered to enable them follow up their DNA as the parents come to claim their students who have been here.
Beyond the casualties recorded, 6 other students were kidnapped to carry food stolen by the rebels from the school store. The Ugandan military has, however, revealed that it has rescued 3 of the abducted students as the country continues to search for the families of the deceased, some of whom were burnt beyond recognition. DNA tests are being deployed to identify the deceased students as the East African country hits a new phase in its battle against rebellion. Condemning the attack, which is said to be one of the most horrific in decades, the country has sought the support of local and international communities to battle a foremost enemy headlong.
Joining me live on the program tonight to discuss this suspected ADF attack on the school in Lhubiriha, I have Simon Ssenyonga, a lawyer, joins us live from Kampala, Uganda, and also Simon Mulongo, security analyst and consultant at EMANS Frontiers, also joining from the Ugandan capital. Also have David Egesa, Freddie David Egesa, private investigator and security analyst, all joining from the Ugandan capital, Kampala. A warm welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining me on Secure the Continent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and
now, I'd like to start with Simon Mulongo. We have 2 Simons on the panel today. So, Simon Mulongo, what's the current security situation in Uganda, particularly in Mpondwe, following the devastating and dastardly terrorist attacks? What's your assessment of the Ugandan government's response so far?
Ssenyonga, did you mean Simon?
Simon Mulongo, the question is directed to you.
Oh, thank you so much, and good evening, viewers. I'm happy to have me on this program. Well, the government did actually respond fairly immediately, though a little too late, because the suspected ADF rebels had already escaped from the scene of the incident. And the effort has been mainly to track them down. And as you stated clearly, 3 students have been rescued. And they have also been able to capture a number of suspected ADF rebels connected to the incident. I think the number is about 6 to date. And the pursuit continues. The president, Yoweri Museveni of Uganda, with the commander-in-chief, has directed that additional forces be deployed in the area, including additional resources that may include aerial resources, that means the helicopters and the drones, to be able to track down these suspected rebels. Of course, the situation is still pensive, with the people terrified and others fleeing for their lives. But the commander responsible for the area has been calming the population and trying to instill confidence back into the population. And with the days as they go by, there seems to be some kind of calm returning to the area. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'd like to bring in David Egesa into the conversation. Now, David, first and foremost, let's look at the history of this sort of attack. Has Uganda ever witnessed this sort of attack on soft targets like a school? And how would you assess the impact of the recent school attack near the Ugandan-Congolese border and the region's security dynamics and the local communities affected?
Of course, thank you so much. Good evening. It is still a sad moment for Ugandans that we have lost our students, we have lost young people, the young generation that would definitely reprint the country as we, the old people, shed off. Yes, it is a long time since we had the Kichwamba invasion, where the rebels, an incursion of rebels came in and banned students, banned dormitories, and we lost so many students. And this time, of course, it's a bit alarming because what was done just in the back door of Operation Suja, which is tightly dealing with the rebels in the Congo. So we find that I think the rebels wanted to write a statement, possibly to do accountability for whoever funds them, or to even tell the public that we still exist. But when we read what they have written, we literally say that they are writing on a very wrong blackboard, because they are telling us that they are not coming in to lead, but they are destroyers. Because if you attack a soft target, you attack students without arms, and you kill so many, you kill girls, you kill boys. So your intention is not to root because maybe you're hungry. Your intention is to be destructive. Now, if they are to be the people who are struggling to be in leadership tomorrow, that means that they lack any political agenda. Of course, it has this kind of destabilized our security in Uganda, and it is very sad, but at the same time, it talks about laxity in terms of our intelligence, laxity in terms of the way, the institutional intelligence mingles with the Wananchi, or the human, the people, the locals' intelligence, because how could these people have walked all this long way for a long time? They came in, they managed to do their mission and went back untouched. It is a kind of...
A lot of questions to be asked from the UPDF and also Ugandan security operatives. Thank you very much, David. Now I'd like to bring in Simon Ssenyonga into the conversation. Now, Simon, the Ugandan government has pointed fingers at the Allied Democratic Forces that operates from Congo, the ADF. Could you provide a comprehensive overview of the ADF, the Allied Democratic Forces, and what evidence points to them as being responsible for this attack on the school in Mpondwe? Have they come out to claim responsibility for this attack? And what factors do you think contribute to their ability to operate across the border? And what is also the primary objective of this group called ADF?
Okay, so let me just respond in reverse order. Number one, I think the primary objective of the ADF has been, as they have at least stated before, is the political differences, especially with the Ugandan government. So in terms of formation, you find that you have intergroups which come up with the UNLA to form the ADF, again with the Islamic formation led by Jamil Mukulu. Number two, obviously, as yet the ADF has not come out openly to own the mission, and again, as we are running, it's still a suspicion. But just for a historical context to the ADF attacks. Now, you remember that in 1997, we had the first attack on August 16th on St. John's Catholic Seminary in Chiburara, which was part of the Greater Kabarole. We also had the Mpondwe School, which was also in Kabarole. Then also the Uganda Technical Institute, which was in Kichwamba, which was one of those that was at the climax. But also there was another school in a place called Kabatunda, which is still around the Kabarole region. So one of the things that obviously gets the government to suspect is because the pattern of operation for the ADF has been the systematic attack on schools, especially in this region. But also number two, you remember that about a week ago, the government of Uganda, specifically the Uganda Political Defense Forces, came out to give some form of accountability with an operation called Operation Shuja, which has been established to wipe out the ADF from Eastern DRC. So because of that operation, you realize that you had some people running from Congo to Uganda. Specifically, the ADF attacked the Domain village, which is in the DRC, and dozens of Ugandan refugees had to run to the Catholic shrine in a place called Kabujiri, which is in Kasese. So when you look at last week's ownership by the UPDF concerning its attack on the ADF, and look at the historical patterns of formation for the ADF concerning the attack of the schools, then there is reasonable suspicion by the Ugandan government that actually it was the ADF which launched out on these attacks. Now, that is on one side of the coin. Now, also the other side of the coin, which I know my colleagues from Uganda are quite aware of, is the recent release of the top cultural leader from the Rwenzururu Kingdom, who is the Omsinga of the Rwenzururu Kingdom, also had certain attributes, at least from some analysts. There are underlying factors attributed to the maladministration in the Ugandan government, but also some dissatisfaction that came out of the release of the Omsinga of the Rwenzururu. So the story has probably about two sides to it. The question of the administration, the question of our operations in DRC, Operation Shuja, but then also the historical patterns of the ADF in regards to the attack on the schools.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'd like to bring in Simon Mulongo into the conversation, still talking about the ADF. There's a saying that charity begins at home. And as we speak, the UPDF, the Ugandan People's Defense Forces, are currently, like Simon said, conducting operations in the eastern DRC, Operation Suja. Beyond Operation Suja, you also have a Ugandan contingent as part of the East African forces that have been deployed to keep the peace in the eastern DRC. As this led to vulnerability at home, is the Ugandan military hierarchy getting the tactics wrong? And what do you think are the main factors that allow the ADF to maintain an insurgency despite previous military operations against them? And can you also speak to the geography of the Mpondwe region, the border region between Congo, DRC, and Uganda?
Thank you so much. First of all, the deployment of the UPDF in the Congo, both against the ADF and part of the East African Community Regional Force, does not necessarily deplete. Did I have
No, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, the deployment of the two contingents is quite a very small fraction. It's a small fraction of the entire force that keeps the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Uganda, so to say. So I don't think that necessarily contributes largely to the vulnerability. I think the major factor here is the asymmetrical warfare that in terms of tactics that's waged by the ADF. Remember, these are foot soldiers who camouflage with the population and have capacity to stealthily move between deployments and sneak through the lines because of the knowledge of the area and also the tactics being guerrillas. It's not frontal. It is not like conventional warfare where you have the two forces operating against each other at a common front. So they're capable of using concealment tactics to be able to sneak through. And I think that's what they did. Secondly, some sections of the population, being locals from both sides of the divide, are a common ethnic community of the Banande and the Bakonzo, who are actually the kith and kin, and who in the long past have been supporting, or sections of them have been supporting the NALU and ADF forces as they evolved from the mid-1990s. And for that matter, they're capable of using that cover to be able to stealthily walk through to the next, to the side of Uganda. The third one is that they are facing a lot of pressure from the operation across in the DRC. And for that matter, they could have wanted to make a signature on the Ugandan side to announce that they are still alive and capable of fighting back, and also to state that the ability to move without detection is still on. And that definitely augurs well with their sponsors. So I think, to me, it's because of a symmetrical nature of the warfare, and also, of course, proximity. This is the same geographical area, same ethnic community that straddles across the borders, and of course the cover, the vegetation cover and mountainous landscape and so on that can facilitate them to be able to move a little freely between the DRC and also come into Uganda despite some degree of deployments.
Thank you very much, Simon. Now, David, Simon did talk about the geography of the area, the common ethnicity, and also the asymmetrical type of their attacks, which makes it easy for them to blend into the local population and carry out hit-and-run attacks. Now, are there any indications, because the ADF has often been described as, you know, ISIS affiliated and also Al-Shabaab affiliated, are there any indications of external actors of foreign support influencing ADF's activities, either through funding, training, or ideological inspiration? And is there any evidence of collaboration and cooperation between ADF and ISIS and Al-Shabaab?
Of course, the support by ISIS and and is known. In fact, it's not just suspicion, it is known, and they always jubilate around it. They have talked about it, and they are one and the same. They have the same intention and the same objectives. So there's no way we can doubt, and possibly that's one of the very big reasons that to a certain extent they have been able to survive long in the bushes. When you look at their supplies in terms of arms, in terms of ammunition, in terms of military wear, which has come up to claim that they are now a portion of their own. So there is no doubt that ADF is being supported by the two, that is ISIS and the ADF, and the Al-Shabaab, and of course in their way of camouflaging under the situation of Islamizing Africa. You can see the spread, you can see what is happening in Sudan. So they are literally, because here they had been boxed out of the ring, they are trying to kind of pronounce. They can make accountability to ISIS, or they can make accountability to Al-Shabaab to indicate that they still exist and they are alive and well.
Okay, they carry out those big attacks to show affiliation and also, send a message to Kampala that, look, we're still here and we're forced to be reckoned with. Now, Simon Ssenyonga, beyond the immediate response to the attack, what long-term strategies should the Ugandan government consider to address the root causes of extremism and prevent future recruitment and radicalization? And where does the majority of the members of the ADF come from? What is the motivation for them to join the ranks of this terrorist organization? And what's the end game for ADF? What do they want? What are their objectives?
I think, first of all, at the core of its formation, the ADF seeks, as one of the colleagues has mentioned, to Islamize the African continent, but also to Islamize the Ugandan society. So it's a deliberate agenda which they continuously push through violence and perhaps then get attraction for an opportunity for dialogue. So that also ties in what should be the long-term solution. Number one, when you look at the nature of our operations, especially in the Ugandan context, in terms of facilitating or supporting foreign governments to deal with peace issues, I think, and I do believe, the first solution has to be that the Ugandan government then needs to empower, and I think as it has taken some reasonable steps, the DRC government for it to be fully independent and impose its state will and authority over its territory. Because this is, again, as you know, a revenge mission. That, look here, the Ugandan government working together with the DRC government, you have the Operation Shuja, wipe out ADF. But the biggest question is within the DRC territory. That DRC suffers, obviously, a big challenge of maladministration. When you look at from the the pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial days, the eastern part of DRC, North Kivu, have been deliberately abandoned. Honorable Simon Mulongo talked about the ethnic question. When you look at, for example, the likes of the Banande, who are in eastern Congo, most of them are not civically conscious of the governance questions within Congo. So most of them are resigned. They basically control the commercial sector. Most of them are resigned to music and entertainment. There is not a lot of enhancement in terms of the civic capacity. So the Ugandan government, one of the best contributions it could make is to work together with the DRC government and regime to impose its state will. And then there can be proper administration. Number two, to raise the civic consciousness. I think the civil societies in Eastern Congo, specifically in the area of Beni, have tried to make some deliberate efforts in awakening the civic consciousness of the people there. Number two, on our side of the Ugandan government, you remember there's been almost after the attack on the school in Kasese, Parliament now came back and said, look here, we allocated over 20 billion to help in the Operation Shuja. There has to be an audit of our participation.
So level of accountability.
And accountability.
Yes.
What have been invested. Yeah, there has to be a specific accountability of the resources being channeled there, and why are we investing in that war? The same question that was still being asked when our base was attacked in Somalia, that for over 14 years we have invested in a war, in a foreign war. How are we benefiting? But I'll give my final solution. You talked about the East African Standby Force. And I would also like to add that the International Conference of the Great Lakes region also made a resolution that there has to be an establishment of a follow-up mechanism and a joint command center. Now, Uganda, for example, fulfilled its obligation by offering Kasese to have a joint command center. Now, the other regional players have not fulfilled. So there has to be a deliberate coalition and move to ensure that there is a regional effort in dealing with such acts of terrorism. So it's not just about Kampala and what they can do. It has to be a corporate effort, because DRC has also made privy, DRC is part of the SADC. There has to be a deliberate effort by all regional players to ensure that there is consistent effort being made to bring peace in Eastern Congo, financial accountability, and a thorough audit as to why Kampala is still investing in that war. But finally, the DRC government needs to impose its state will to govern its nation.
Thank you, Simon. Now, Honourable Mulongo, your namesake, Simon, did speak to the point of cooperation. And there's a saying that you can't go to sleep if your neighbour's house is on fire. The DRC has had its own fair share of instability for years now. Now, given ADF's history of operating across borders, what steps are being taken to enhance regional cooperation and intelligence sharing between Uganda and the Democratic Republic of Congo to effectively address the ADF threat? Because it's a big threat to both countries.
First of all, I just want to state that to reinforce what my comrade Egesa stated about participation of foreign fighters in the ADF. There are foreign fighters from the Arab communities and also in the region from Tanzania, from Rwanda, from Burundi, from Uganda, and the DRC itself. We also have had some foreign fighters from the Maghreb areas, from Morocco, for example. And so we're talking about communities that are from far and wide. Now, back to your question. The issue of the cooperation has been mainly between Kinshasa and Kampala because of the proximity of the ADF locations that lie almost at the border between the two countries. But of course, with the other operations that have been going on that involves the UN, including the intervention brigade in the South Kivu, and that brings together part of the Eastern Africa and DRC themselves and SADC. There is some fusion cell that was created for purposes of sharing intelligence, information, and also making collaborative effort in terms of not just information, but also deploying staff officers at certain fusion centers in the DRC. But that is really to the southern Kivu. But when it comes to the northern Kivu and part of the two regions, the cooperation has been mainly bilateral between Kinshasa and Kampala. And we have the joint command in Eastern DRC, in which the UPDF work with together with the FEDAC and carry out joint operations with the Joint Command Center. And this cooperation has been expanded through establishment of a commission that looks at other areas of collaboration and cooperation that include infrastructure development, as mentioned by my namesake, Simon, and also it includes issues of trade and general development between the two countries, and roads infrastructure being done from Uganda into Eastern DRC that are aimed at linking key trade centers, and the aim at also developing a railway linkage between Uganda and Rwanda to some major cities of the eastern part of DRC, and so on. So to me, I think these collaborative mechanisms have enabled easy joint engagements, particularly between the forces and security agencies, supported by other service deliverables to the both communities of the both sides of the country. And this enables deeper understanding and appreciation of each other's efforts towards bring about stability in the region.
Thank you very much, Simon. A fine place to go on a break. And when we return from the break, we will be looking at solutions going forward to prevent these sorts of attacks from happening again in Uganda. Do stay with us. This is Secure the Continent at News Central Television. We'll be right back after this quick timeout. You're welcome back to Secure the Continent and News Central Television. If you're just staying with us, if you're just joining us, rather, we've been looking at the security situation in Uganda, where over 42 people were killed in an attack by suspected Allied Democratic Forces rebels. Now, joining me on this discussion, we still have Simon Ssenyonga, a lawyer, and also Simon Mulongo, security analyst and consultant at EMANS Frontiers. We also have the pleasure of having Freddie David Egesa, a private investigator, all joining live from the Ugandan capital, Kampala. Now I'd like to start the second half with you, Freddie David Egesa. Can you provide an assessment of the social and psychological impact of the attack on the affected community, especially the families and victims of and the surviving students? Is there any sort of psychosocial treatment and counseling that has been offered to this grieving student?
Thank you so much. Of course, in an African setting, We are still deeply social. We are still deeply connected. We may not have the institutions that manage situations of counseling, like very well established systems. Of course, the government is doing whatever they can. The medical teams are there. Of course, our religion, we are still very religious and very interconnected as families, and counseling and managing of crises and managing of stress and managing of trauma amongst ourselves is only natural in Africa, and especially in Uganda, because we still have that family support, we still have that religious support, and we still have, of course, the medical support will just supplement. So because we are so close to each other in terms of social interactions, we always, wherever there is a situation, wherever there is sadness, there is that situation, there is that kind of inner support from families, from villages, and from the bigger families. Of course, there is such a big impact, more especially in Kasese. We may not feel it in Kampala, where we are, but in the central, but I'm sure in those areas, in those jungles, people feel very insecure. And of course, there has been great deployments of the military, only that it still dogs them when I'm sure, because they don't know when these people can appear again. So the government has to work so hard, UPDF has to work so hard to kind of establish or bring back that kind of protection and that type of feeling that wananchi they are secure.
Thank you, Freddie. I'd like to bring in Simon Ssenyonga. David did talk about the impact it will have on those living in those areas, because they don't know the next time ADF will strike, so they're living with some sort of tension. Now, Simon, given the ADF's ability to divert attention and launch attacks in different locations, this cat and mouse asymmetrical guerrilla warfare type of attacks, what additional measures should the UPDF take to prevent attacks in other vulnerable areas of Uganda? Because the ordinary people, every Ugandan life is important. They don't want to know what sort of tactics. The responsibility of government is to protect the lives and properties of Ugandan citizens. So the security operatives must be on top of their game at every point in time, regardless of the ADF's tactics.
I think, first of all, when you read the and as a lawyer, I'll tell you, when you read the UPDF Act, it talks about the charge given to the UPDF to protect our territorial integrity as a nation and our borders. Now, over the years, when you look at the chunk of allocation of resources of the financial budget of Uganda, the UPDF takes quite a substantive share. Now, over the past 2 years, I've been reviewing the Auditor General's reports on how UPDF has been performing in terms of allocation of resources. And there has been issues which have been raised in terms of financial accountability and even management of resources. So the solution need not to be more of an external solution, but also an internal solution. Because when you look at the recent attack on the school in Kasese, I mean the UPDF barracks from the school at Kasese, which was attacked, is quite a few meters. The response takes almost an hour. The attack is at 11 p.m. The response of the UPDF comes after about an hour. The police station was quite nearby there. Previously, when the attack came up over the UPDF barracks in Somalia and the contingent in Somalia, questions began arising internally within the UPDF about the welfare of the soldiers. So, response time, that's number one, but also questions of welfare are very fundamental to be addressed. So there has to be an internal reflection of the management of the army. Number two, the broader question of us as a Ugandan people. There has to be a central nervous system where each of us as Ugandans feel after an attack that is launched out on any other Ugandan. This is not an attack on just the people of Kasese. It is a potential attack and raid, and a message being sent to any Ugandan out there. So there has to be a deliberate civic participation and consciousness in the involvement of the governance issues of our nation. We need to take interest as to why our army is participating in any other foreign war. This is the time for us to take interest in our foreign policy as a nation. So civic consciousness then gets people to be active participants in any issue that affects them. Because when you look at, as Simon and Egesa have talked about the asymmetrical nature of this war, you find that there is a total camouflage within the ethnic people, and the ADF can easily penetrate. But you see the not civically, you know, the distance from the Mpondwe, from DRC, and the school which was attacked, these were foot soldiers. They had a long time to plan. They camouflage. That means they move from village to village, even greeting the people. Why then were the people not cautious enough to raise alarm? Most certainly, they have laid back and abandoned their civic obligation just to the state. So civic consciousness is important even in developing a conscious, sustainable intelligence system that gets people to be active participants in offering solutions. So there need not to be an outlook of, you know, let the people out there think about it. But finally, in terms of a more sustainable solution, the biggest demographic of the Ugandan population are young people. There has to be deliberate conversation with the young people, number one, to participate in dialogue as an alternative to war. Because you see the majority of the ADF who are being recruited are young people. They're being persuaded that, you know, we are taking you to DRC, you're going to be doing business, there is all these gold mines. But then they need to be aware and consciously aware that this is their nation, these are their nations. The path of destruction is not a sustainable one. So there has to be dialogue, even with the warring parties that are involved in this. So the regime needs to participate actively in dialogue with the warring parties from the ADF side, among others, even with the rest of the, from the DRC side, whether it's also from the Rwanda, Namibia, and all other regional entities. So dialogue, for me, is very important. Accountability, financial accountability, and development of the conscious central nervous system for the national field after an attack against each of their people.
Thank you, Simon. Now, Simon Mulongo, I want to start from the point that your namesake raised about dialogue. Is it possible for the Ugandan government to even consider dialogue with such a diabolical group that will attack innocent children? Is it a possibility? And also, how does this attack shape the perception of security and stability in Uganda, both domestically and internationally? And what implications does it have for the country's tourism and investment sectors? I know this attack took place in Kasese. I don't know how much of the tourist attraction it is. It's not in Murchison, it's not in Jinja, it's not in Kampala. So will this have any sort of effect on tourism and investment in Uganda?
This attack definitely waters down on the very good name of the UPDF that have built over time. The UPDF have been known in the region as very professional and very well resourced and in terms of military capabilities and able to operate anywhere, whether in the jungles for the Congo or in the savanna woodlands of the South Sudan and also in the desert areas of Somalia, where they performed exemplary well, despite this attack that has definitely come into, as I said, to bring a question mark onto them in terms of whether they still maintain an upper hand on intelligence and whether they have good grip in terms of civil military relations with the population. And as you may recall, it comes on the heels when we had a beating in Somalia, where in the south of Mogadishu, we lost a base, by the fact that the UPDF withdrew from the base. The majority of them withdrew, but we lost about 54 of our gallant fighters there. Now, this definitely brings some kind of question as to whether the UPDF is alert and as professional as it's supposed to be. But I want to hastily add that since 1986, when the UPDF NRA came into power, there have been some 29 rebel groups that have made an attempt at the shot into the power into Kampala. But all of them have been defeated. And Uganda is proud to say that no incursion or any direct attack onto its soil has been successful. These are just but incursions that are done, long jump operations by some groups where they just sneak in and run back out of the country. So no one has demonstrated that they can wage a war within the country and sustain it. But I also want to say that the impact, of course, this has caused is immense. Other than just those questions that require to be strengthened by the UPDF in terms of intelligence, in terms of being alert and increasing on patrols and so on to ensure that there's a degree of coverage in this porous border with Uganda and Congo. There is this issue of tourism that you've just pointed out correctly. I'm told that a number of tourists who had booked to come into the area, the nearby national park, the Queen Elizabeth, have had to cancel their request to come in. And I think, of course, for them, they don't know the geography. They think Mpondwe is in the entire Uganda, and even if they book from Falls, they meet north or northeastern, like Kidepo, they think that maybe it is the same thing. So definitely has an impact. But I also want to say that the UPDF may consider developing a more effective counter-asymmetrical warfare, because you cannot use conventional means to fight asymmetrical warfare. It requires small bands of responsive armed groups that can actually go after these people who are light and agile and capable to move faster. And they may be supported by aerial resources, but definitely the foot patrols and foot movements are supposed to be increased. The other one is that we are fighting an ideological warfare. You can't just use the military alone. We need to look at how we can do the counter-ideological approach that can water down on these ultra-extremism ideas of the Quran and the way they are teaching these people to become even martyrs. We need to bring in Islamic scholars. We need to bring in Islamic messages to be able to relay them in one way or the other, to be able to reach out to them, even if they're very close as they are. We also need to mobilize the population to be very sensitive. I know it has been the case, but because of the lapse of time since the ADF were operating that area since 2002, 2005, it has been some while, and therefore this lapsed and the population could have sat back. And that's how they managed to sneak in with very little attention from the population. But this can also be addressed by sensitizing the population, developing local defense units within the population to be able to say they're able to respond to a threat before the main force arrives, since you cannot have a force that can man every meter of the population in such a huge area, mountainous area. So finally, I think we should also address the structural issues that are run up to this safe haven, so to say, of this rebel group. We have some political questions in the past that gave rise to ADF, the birth of NALU, the resistance by the communities there against the central government right at the colonial time and at independence, that it became a pocket for others to come in and form a fertile ground to fight the government. All these things require to be addressed so that we do not have any excuse whatsoever by the communities trying to ally with or support the rebel groups against the people and the government of Uganda. Back to you.
I'd like to say a big thank you to our esteemed guest tonight in the program. I believe we've spoken quite robustly about the issue of ADF and everything surrounding that very terrible attack in Kasese last week that led to the loss of lives of innocent students. I'd like to say thank you to you, Simon Ssenyonga, a lawyer joining from Kampala, and also Simon Mulongo, security analyst and consultant at EMANS Frontiers, also joining from the Ugandan capital, Kampala, and also Freddie David Egesa, private investigator and security analyst. I will say a big thank you to you for your time and insights on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you.
To safeguard schools from rebel attacks like the recent one by the ADF rebels that resulted in the loss of over 42 lives, the Ugandan government should bolster security by increasing trained forces implementing regular patrols and improving intelligence gathering, enhancing coordination and communication between security agencies, communities and schools is vital, along with conducting security drills for staff and students, addressing root causes through socio-economic development initiatives and community engagement is also crucial to mitigate future attacks. Thanks for watching, and remember to stay safe at all times. I am Gbenga Aborowa. See you next time on Security.